page 79 continued. But a grant of 794 speaks of two new officials, Ayuktaka and Niyuktaka 97, who usually appear in all later grants, 98. Thus, we do not come across more than 5 regular officers. It may be argued that the other officers are not mentioned because they were not concerned with the grants, 99. But if this analogy is extended to the Pala grants, it would imply that 24 Pala officials were connected with land grants, which does not seem to be reasonable. Really, the Rashtrakuta system did not provide for too many officers, for like the Pratiharas, they mainly depended for their administration on their feudatories and vassals. This can be also inferred from the absence of the names of the police officials in the Rashtrakuta records. Only the Ankroli Charoli copperplate of Kakaraja of Gujarat mentions officials concerned with thieves, Chorodharanikas, stop 100. Again, the argument that they need no mention in land grants 101 does not seem to be tenable. Probably in Maharashtra and Gujarat, police functions were entrusted to local vassals, which dispensed with the necessity of employing regular officials for the purpose. Para. The titles and designations of Pala, Pratihara kings and officials betray feudal relationship. The epithets Parama Bhattaraka, Parameshwara, and Maharaja Dhiraja, adopted by later Gupta rulers and then by Pala and Pratihara kings, do not indicate any real increase in royal power, but merely suggest that the king was supreme over lords, chiefs, and princes owing allegiance to him. The term Maha, M-A-H-A, great or chief, found in the designations of Pala officials, Maha Dosadha Dhanika, Maha Karta Kritika, Maha Sandhi Vigraha, 102 etc., shows that they were being brought in line with feudal vassals such as Mahasamanta and Maharaja. Para. The tendency to feudalize officers was stronger under the Pratiharas. We learn that in one case, Kokatta, the commander-in-chief, Baladhikrita of Mahendrapala II was known as, page 80, Parameshwara Pad Upajivin, 103. His contemporary, Madhava, who held the title of governor, Tantrapala, and chief commander, Mahadandanayaka, was known as Mahasamanta, 104, probably a title conferred on him by his Pratihara overlord. Furthermore, Undavata, the governor of a town, was a Mahapratihara, but he held the title of Mahasamantadhipati, 105, head of the vassals. Apparently, these titles carried certain privileges and obligations of which we have no clear idea. Nevertheless, the Mahasamanta was an important figure, and in erecting religious pillars, his subjects made reference to his reign and to that of his overlord. 106. Para. Feudalization of functionaries seems to have been a development of some importance under the Rashtrakutas. Sri Mandala, the Mahasadhi Vigrahika of Dhruva was a Samanta vassal entitled to the use of 5 great musical instruments, 107. Provincial governors were given the status of Mahasamantas or Mahamandaleshwara, 108, and often bore the title of Raja or Rasa, Canaries, Canareac, 109. Some Vishayapatis, district officers, enjoyed feudatory status, 110. Bhogikas or Bhogapatis, officers in charge of bhuktis or talukas, sometimes possessed feudatory titles, 111, as also did the governors of large towns. Kuppey, Kuppey, the governor of Soratur in Karnataka, was a Mahasamanta under Amogavarsha I, 112, in the same manner as the governor of Siadoni under the Pratiharas. Military officers were likewise being given pompous uniforms, and they were allowed certain privileges which seem to have been confined to the feudal chiefs. As we learn from the case of the Brahmana Dandanayaka Visottara under Govinda IV in 930, they were invested with the robes, ROBES, of their office, assigned distinctive parasols, and permitted to use elephants and chariots, 113. The Yuva Raja or the heir apparent was also given feudal titles, 114, para. The association of feudal titles with officials may be interpreted in 2 ways. Either the Samantas or Mahasamantas were appointed to different posts, or else the officers were placed in the recognized feudal categories. The first does not seem to be possible for several reasons. The officers were older while the feudal ranks were evolved later. Secondly, under the Pratiharas, we know of officers who at first did not hold feudal titles, but, page 81, received them only later. Thirdly, if we accept the first alternative, it would mean that even the Yuva Raja was first made a Mahasamanta and then raised to the status of crown prince. This lands us in an absurd position, for generally the eldest son was considered to be Yuva Raja by his birth. Hence, the second alternative, that officials were feudalized, sounds more logical. The process of feudalization affected the whole social order, and in the Rashtrakuta kingdom, besides feudatories, regular officers, civil and military, high and low, were placed in one feudal rank or the other. It seems that official posts by themselves did not carry sufficient weight unless they were given feudal recognition. Para. An indication of the growing feudalization of officials is found in the practice of using the same terminology to express the relationship between the vassals and the king, and also that between the officials and the king. Although the term Raj Upajivin, Raj-Opajivin, is used at one place in the Arthashastra of Kautilya, 115, similar expressions came to be used frequently for both officials and vassals in the inscriptions of our period. The Parivrajaka inscriptions of Gupta times use the term Pada, Pada-pinned, Pind- Upajivin, Opajivin, 116, subsisting on the royal subsidy. But now in the Pala and other inscriptions we have numerous other terms of the same type. These may be enumerated as Pada Padam Upajivin, 117, Raja Pada Upajivin, 118, Pada Prasad Upajivin 119, Parameshwara Pad Upajivin 120 etc. para. Sometimes the vassals are also called Bhrithya and Sambandhin, as can be inferred from the Prakrit text Samarichaka by Haribhadra Suri, circa AD 700 to 770. 1-1. It shows that the defeated chiefs entered into the relation of quote, kinsman unquote, with the conquering overlord and his nobles. Thus, two nobles, one as Shabara and the other a Vaishya, attached to the same prince, treated each other as Sambandhin, a term translated as kinsman by Dr. Dasharatha Sharma 1-2. But they neither belonged to the same kin nor were related to one another by ties of marriage. The term Sambandhin, however, had to be used because no other word could express this bond between the overlord on the one hand and his nobles on the other. It also seems to imply the relationship between two vassals of the same overlord. We learn from the same text that when a frontier chief rebelled against his overlord, page 82, the son of that lord asked his people not to take very stringent measures, saying, quote, this Vigraha is an insignificant chief, but he had been paying tribute to our father, hence he is our kinsman and we should not take any precipitate military action against him. Unquote, 1-3. The prince looks upon Vigraha, the Bhrithya of his father, as his elder brother, 1-4. The idea being that both the prince and the vassal were the dependents of the overlord. The fact that a prince, Kshatriya of the ruling dynasty, considers himself as the younger brother of a defeated aboriginal Shabara chief shows that the hereditary element so characteristic of the Varna system did not always determine the social relations, which were sometimes shaped by political and military considerations, although were expressed in the prevailing tribal or family idiom. Thus, an aboriginal chief who paid tribute to and depended on the king was regarded as his son and not condemned as an Anarya 1-5 according to the Dharmashastras. However, the terms Sambandhin and Bhrithya are not employed by the epigraphs to indicate feudal relationships. Generally, the feudal lords and officials are described as subsisting on the lotus feet of the king, para. The chief obligation of the vassals was to pay homage and render military aid to their overlords. One of the ways in which they paid homage was to mention the name of their overlords in their grants, as was done by the vassals of the Pratiharas. Similarly, on several occasions, Chehmana 1-6, Chalukya 1-7, Guhilot Guhilot 1-8, and Kolachuri vassals gave military help to their Pratihara overlords. The grants issued by the Pala kings from Devapala onwards invariably describe their victory camps as being attended by numerous tributary princes from northern India, accompanied by their contingents 1-9. This may be an exaggeration but may refer to small local chiefs who assembled at the temporary capitals to wait on their Pala overlords. At any rate, there is no doubt that in order to suppress the Kaivarta revolt in about 1070, the Palas mobilized the military support of their vassals on a massive scale, para. The Rashtrakuta records give us some idea of the powers and privileges as well as the obligations of the vassals. a measure of the high feudal rank enjoyed by some vassals was their investiture with the Pancha Mahashabda by the Pratihara 130. And page 83, Rashtrakuta kings 131, without doubt, this was the highest distinction that could be attained by a vassal, for even the Yuvaraj enjoyed no higher feudal privilege than this. Even when some feudatories had adopted such impartial titles, even when some feudatories had adopted such imperial titles as Paramabhattaraka Maharaja Parameshwara, they continued to bear this epithet. It was, however, not known by the Pala kingdom, although it obtained in Assam and Orissa. Under the Rashtrakutas, vassals were also permitted to use a feudal throne, fly whisk, FLYWHISK, palanquins and elephants, 132, of which we have no clear indication under the Palas and Pratiharas. As shown earlier, an important right of the vassals was to create their sub-vassals, some of whom were given the privilege of using the 5 great musical instruments. We may quote here the examples of the Mahasamanta Nimbadevarasa, Nimbadevarasa, vassal of the Konkan Silaharas 133, and of the Mahasamanta Buddheshwara, a vassal of the Gujarat Rashtrakutas 134. Subject to the payment of tribute, the big vassals enjoyed full power over their revenues. They could assign taxes 135 and grant villages, sometimes with and sometimes without the permission of the overlord. Under the Western Chalukyas, vassals could also sell villages without the sanction of the imperial power. 136 para. The vassals bore both civil and military obligations towards their overlord. Their most important civil obligation was regular payment of tribute, which was sometimes personally realized by the overlord. The Rashtrakuta king Govinda III went on tour in the southern parts of his empire to levy tribute from his feudatories 137. A later text, the Niti Vakyamrita, refers to special presents made by vassals in the court on such festive occasions as the birth of a son or a royal marriage. 138. Other obligations of a civil nature were compliance with imperial orders and attendance at the imperial court on ceremonial occasions at periodical intervals 139, which took the form of rendering homage. The vassals were clearly not obliged to render any advice to the overlord or render him any administrative assistance at the center. Para. Military obligation was more important and consisted in rendering aid to the overlord in times of war. The vassals of the Rashtrakutas had to supply a certain number of troops to their lord and participate in his imperial campaigns. The Chalukyas of Vengi, page 84, had to furnish forces to the Rashtrakutas in their wars against the Gangas, 140. Narasimha Chalukya, a feudatory of Indra III, took a successful part in the latter's campaign against the Gurjara Pratihara king Mahipala. 141. The Gujarat Rashtrakuta Viceroyalty, in practice a large fief, was created to serve as a shield against the Gurjara Pratiharas or the protection of Malwa. 142, which was also a bone of contention between the Marathas and the Rajputs in the 18th century. Para. Just as the Rashtrakuta rulers claimed military service from their vassals, so also their vassals claimed it from their sub-vassals. This can be inferred from the Kolhapur inscription of the Silahara Mahamandaleshwara Gandaraditya Deva. Although a record of 1135, it might be taken as a survival of the state of affairs when the Silaharas were the vassals of the Rashtrakuta. It describes the relations of the Mahasamanta Nimbadeshwara with various kinds of vassals, inimical and friendly, probably towards his overlord Gandaraditya. The Mahasamanta is represented as, quote, a breaker of the hair parting of the dames of hostile barons, a gallant dear, dear, to the courtesans of warriors, a wind dissipating the clouds, within bracket off, bracket closed, opponent barons, a furious elephant to Nagala Devi, a time of world dissolution to enemy barons, a Gopala to the worthiest of barons, a heroic Kumara to the demon Tara's rival barons, an awful rotting elephant in the beds of the lotuses, within bracket, who are, bracket close, the barons of Tondai, within bracket, Tondai, within bracket A, bracket close, rod for the skillful right hand of King Gandaraditya, crest hyphen gem of barons, stop, unquote, 143. This glowing account of the achievements of the great vassal may not be literally true, but it clearly indicates the obligation of a Mahasamanta to suppress inimical and protect friendly Samantas. Para. The overlord exercised control over his feudatories in various ways. Under the Rashtrakutas, feudatories had to entertain an ambassador from the imperial court. He exercised general supervision and control similar to that of resident in British India. According to Suleiman, he was received with a profound respect due to the representative of the paramount power. He maintained numerous spies for obtaining information. Amogha Varsha I is known to have covered the courts of hostile kings with thousands of courtesans who probably worked under the imperial ambassador. 144. The overlord made his power felt, page 85, by alienating villages in the dominions of his vassals. Krishna II allotted a village situated within the jurisdiction of the Mahasamanta Prachanda. 145. Disloyal feudatories were kept under check by the fear of humiliation and retribution that followed the failure of their rebellions. They were subjected to various indignities. The ruler of Vengi had to sweep the stables of his victor Govinda II, 146. Feudatories had to surrender their precious treasures, dancing girls, horses, and elephants to the imperial power as punishment for their disloyalty, 147. Even their wives were put into prison, 148. Sometimes the defeated feudatories were dispossessed of all their property and territories, out of which the king created livings for his dependents, as Krishna III did in South Arcot district after having conquered the Chola territories, 149. Bara. We have no clear idea of the royal machinery for dealing with the vassals. Perhaps the Mahasandhi Vigrahika was in charge of the Rashtrakuta royal policy towards the vassals, both in times of war and peace. Altekar holds that this official drafted all the land charters because the Foreign Office possessed the most reliable and up-to-date information on the exploits and genealogy of the grantor to be incorporated in the grants 150. But an equally, if not more, important portion of the charter related to the whereabouts of the grantor and grantee as well as of the village to be granted, and this could have been better recorded by the Revenue Office. However, this had to be done by the Sandhi Vigrahika because, in our opinion, he dealt with feudatories of all kinds. The Manas Sollasa, written in 1131 by Someshwara III of the Chalukya dynasty of Kalyani, which had supplanted the Rashtrakuta power in 973, lays down that the Sandhi Vigrahika should be an expert in summoning and dismissing and in installing the Samantas, Mandaleshas, and particularly the Maniakas. 151. Since peacetime relations with the vassals consisted in stipulating tributes levied on grants of land or in confirming the jurisdiction of the vassal over the fiefs, he drafted all secular charters and even those relating to land grants to brahmanas and temples. 152. Para. In spite of imperial control, sometimes the vassals made their power felt in central politics. The feudatories of Govinda II, page 86, rebelled against him and offered the crown to his uncle Amogavarsha III, who was pressed by them to accept it to preserve the glory of the Rashtrakuta kingdom. Altekar thinks that the phrase Samantai-Ratha, Ratta Arititiye-Rajya-Mahim -Alamb- Artha Mavir-Theta 153, which conveys this meaning, is figurative, 154. But the election of the king among the Palas of Bengal and the Somavangshis of Orissa lends support to the selection of Amogavarsha III. This instance therefore shows that the vassals could even depose and install kings, although such cases were rare and did not have the sanction of law. Para. The vassals and aristocratic elements occupied a fairly important position in local government, which were being gradually monopolized by narrow family circles. Supervisors over units of 10 or 12 villages were appointed by the district officers from amongst their relatives. In the Dharwa district, an officer of Amogavarsha I, ruling over a unit of 300 villages, had under him a relative in charge of 12 villages. 155. Bankeya, Bankeye, the governor of Banavasi, appointed his son Kundatta, Kundatta, to administer the Nidgugundej, Nidgugundage 12. 156. According to Altekar, the terms Rathika, Rashtriya, Rashtrapati, and Rashtrakuta were used to denote local chiefs, district officers, and big landlords. 157. Some records mention Vishaya Mahattaras and Rashtra Mahattaras, 158, who seem to have been associated with the management of local affairs, but they probably represented aristocratic and hereditary rather than popular elements. Para. The mention of only the village elders in the grants presupposes some social stratification in the rural area. In the Pala grants of Bengal and Bihar, all sections of the village population, right from the Brahmanas down to the Chandalas, are informed of the land gifts, but they do not figure in the Rashtrakuta grants in Maharashtra and Gujarat. On the other hand, their place is taken by the Mahattaras or the Mahattaradhikarins 159. Some of these rose further in status and acquired the rank of Ranaka. Such was the Mahattaka Gogu Ranaka, who acted as the executor of a grant of Amogavarsha I, 160. Mahattara Swadhikarin, who held a similar position under Krishna II, 161, is another example. Apparently, the Mahattaras were elevated at the cost of the other sections of the rural population, and they provided a suitable social base for the recruitment of higher functionaries and for the growth of feudalism under the Rashtrakutas. Page 87, para. The development of feudal relations between the state and the guilds also characterized the Rashtrakuta polity. A guild of the merchants of Dambal was invested with umbrellas, chauris, ceremonial fans, and royal charters by the Chalukya king Jagadeka Malla, 162. The same seems to be true of the guilds under the Rashtrakutas for the Kolhapur 163 and Miraj 164 inscriptions of the Silaharas. The feudatories of the Rashtrakutas refer to the banner of the guild of the Veera Balanjas bracket, the company of brave merchants bracket closed, bearing the device of a heel. Umbrellas, chauris, and banners were symbols of power delegated to the guilds by the kings and reminds us of feudal charters granted to them in medieval Europe. Like feudal vassals, guilds were placed under the obligation of supplying soldiers to their sovereign. The Kolhapur record describes the guild of merchants as, quote, exalted in abundant boldness, comma, embraced by the Lady Fame, F-A-M-E, F capital, comma, having their breasts a home for the goddess of victory, bracket, won by their arms, bracket closed, comma, lofty in prowess, bracket, extending, bracket closed, over the world, dot, 165. Another record speaks of a similar guild under the Chalukyas as comprising persons, comma, quote, whose breasts were embraced by the goddess of perfect impetuosity and bravery, unquote, stop, 166. All this shows that guilds maintained soldiers and probably helped their overlords. 167, para. The Palas had no fixed capital. Patuliputro 168, Mudgagiri Mudgagiri 169, Ramavati 170, bracket, near modern Gaura in the Malda district, bracket closed, comma, Vata Parvataka, bracket, modern Vateshwara Parvata near Pahar Ghata in the Bhagalpur district, bracket closed, comma, Vilasapura or Haradhama, comma, 171, Sahashaganda, 172, Kanchanpura, 173, and Kapilavaska, 174, bracket, the last four unidentified, bracket closed, are mentioned as their Jayaskandhavaras. All these capitals were situated on the Ganga, which served as a great unifying factor in the Pala dominions. But the constant shift of the seats of power was certainly a disintegrating factor in the kingdom and indicates administrative decentralization typical of feudal polity. In this respect, the Pratiharas enjoyed more stability, for only Ujjaini and Mahodaya identical with Kannauj, are known to have been their capitals. 175. They did not feel the necessity of impressing their power on the feudal lords by moving their capital from place to place. Page 88 para. In contrast to the Palas, the Rashtrakutas had a definite capital situated in Manyakheta or Malkhed. We know of their several military and ordinary camps, 176, from which they issued land charters. Al-Masudi informs us that the seat of the Rashtrakuta king's government was generally among mountains, which Altekar does not believe. 177. But the statement may indicate shifting military camps at places with good natural defense for the suppression of refractory vassals. Para. What distinguished the Rajput polity was the imposition of clan aristocracies on old settled villages. The Gurjaras came in the wake of the Hunas from Central Asia. It is thought that they were the Indian equivalents of a Central Asian people. Yusun, W-U-S-U-N, who came to be known as Gusur, G-U-S-U-R, in the 4th century, and this gave rise to the term Gujar, G-U-J-A-R, which was Sanskritized into the term Gurjara, 178. We may add that as a foreign element, the Gusurs appeared in India earlier. An inscription of the 3rd century from Abbottabad mentions, quote, Shafar, S-H-A-P-H-A-R, who is the son of Makka and a member of the Gasura clan of Klas, unquote, stop 179. Here, both Makka and Shafar, S-H-A-P-H-A-R, are foreign names, and so is the term Gasura, which is equated with the Kroraina, K-R-O-R-A-Y-I-N-A, Gusura, and Kuchian, Sanskrit Gausura, interpreted as a person of good family or of the Gausura class of nobility. Stop 180. This suggests that the Gausuras or Gurjars came to India as a conquering minority. Coming from outside, they imposed themselves as dominant clans on settled villages. The tribal practice that the spoil should be distributed among the members of the tribe led to the appointment of villages among the conquering chiefs, some of whom received them in units of 84. Units of 12 and 84 villages are found in Gujarat under the Rashtrakutas and may have originated because of Gurjara settlements in that area, 181. So far as the kingdom of the Gurjara Pratiharas is concerned, this unit first occurs in a 9th century inscription of Chalukya feudatory of the Pratiharas, 182. But units of 12 and its multiples are found in the records of the Chehmanas, Paramaras, and Chalukyas, 183. This is understandable because perhaps all these three tribes were ethnically allied to the Gurjara Pratiharas, as can be inferred from the bardic traditions which trace the origin of all these peoples to a common sacrificial peat, Agnikunda, on Mount Abu, page 89. Whether earlier tribal organization in Central Asia knew of the practice of sharing settlements in certain numerical units is a point worth investigation. When the Yuechis, Yue-Chis, conquered Ta, Ta-Hia, H-I-A, bracket, Tokharistan, Tokharestan, bracket closed, in the 2nd century BC, they distributed the whole area among 5 chiefs, 184. But in the early Middle Ages, the Central Asian tribes preferred to have units of 24. The earliest indication is found in Tokharistan in the middle of the 7th century AD, when the Turkish ruler of that region divided that area into 24 districts with the help of the Chinese 185. We have also some idea of the number of the component tribes of the Oghuz, Oghuz, a Turkish people of Central Asia, whose history is known from the 8th century AD. In the beginning, the Oghuz were a group of 9 tribes, 186, but as they gradually incorporated defeated peoples into their group, the number rose to 22 in the 11th century. 187. Slowly their number went up to 24, for in the Seljuk period the Quinik, Q-I-N-I-Q, are listed by a contemporary as one of the 24 clans of the Oghuz. 188. Probably the Central Asian custom of increasing the number of clans in a national unit was imported into medieval India. According to the later Bardic tradition, the Rajputs consisted of 36 clans, which in the beginning may have numbered 12 or 24. It seems that whenever new territories were conquered, an attempt was made to provide at least one village for every clan of the conquering horde, giving rise to units of 12 or 24 villages. But later, these units became conventional, and the head of a clan or the scion of the ruling chief was given groups of 12 villages or their multiples. Para. What is the significance of the introduction of the DUO-decimal system? The Pala fiscal units of 1 and 10 villages placed under the Gramapati and the Dasagramika 189 were as old as Manu. It seems that under the decimal system, officials appointed by the king administered the areas placed under their charge under direct royal control. Perhaps this accounts for so many officials under the Palas, although under the Rashtrakutas some decimal units were held by feudatories and their relatives. Again, under the decimal system, officials were paid by grant of some land, which formed a very small part of the total area under their jurisdiction, page 90. On the other hand, under the duodecimal system, if we go by the Chehmana inscriptions of later times, territorial units were held mainly not by regular officials but by vassals, who generally happened to be the members of the ruling class. Further, the decimal system seems to have prevailed in eastern India, and from the 8th century it also obtained in the Deccan, where the new peoples could not penetrate in any considerable numbers. On the other hand, the duodecimal system prevailed in parts of Rajasthan and Gujarat, and at a later stage in Uttar Pradesh also, 190. In course of time, the assignees of these Rajput village units came to look upon themselves as their enjoyers and called them their personal estates, Swabhaga, S-V-A-B-H-O-G-A, para. The increase of religious intermediaries in land, the payment of vassals and officials by land grants, the feudalization of the title of kings and officials, the shifting of capitals, the imposition of clan chiefs on old villages, all these factors may be taken as feudal elements in the early medieval polity of northern India. But on the whole, most of them are more typical of the Pratihara polity than of the Pala. In the Rashtrakuta polity, however, the number of religious beneficiaries enjoying fiscal and administrative rights was greater. The right of sub-infeudation was widely recognized. The obligations and privileges of the vassals, who sometimes deposed their overlord and installed another, were fairly defined. And even guilds were treated as vassals. Officials were few and were becoming feudalized. Local administration was mainly manned by the feudalized officials, vassals, and their families who probably maintained some link with the village elders. The Rashtrakuta capital was, however, fixed, although bonds of kinship were used in some cases to organize administration. The early medieval polity can neither be regarded kin-based or segmentary. Next, notes and references.